Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll be solving IGCSE Biology, May June 2019, paper 23, so let's get started. Question 1 says, students find a small organism in a pond. They catch it and put it into a large jar of water. They see that the organism swims away from light. It lays some eggs before they put it back into the pond. Which characteristics of living things did the students see in this organism? So I went ahead and wrote down all of the characteristics of living things. An acronym for them is Mrs. Grin, as you can see in red. So let's go ahead and check what the organism already did. So it swims away from light, which shows two characteristics already. It shows sensitivity because it detected where the light was, and movement because it moved away from it. And it lays some eggs, which means it reproduced. So the answer is D. Question 2 says the diagram shows how Homo sapiens could have evolved from earlier ancestors. Which statement about modern people and their ancestors is correct? So when given the binomial name of an organism, the first name is always the genus in capital letters, and then the second name is species in small letters, which is always either in italics or underlined. So if we look at the names, they all have the same first names, meaning they do belong to the same genus. This eliminates options B and D. And if we look at the second name, they're all different, meaning they don't belong to the same species. So this eliminates option A, leaving us with C, which is the answer. And says with a high respiration rate, what would be found in the cytoplasm in increased numbers? The answer is A, because the mitochondria is where respiration occurs to release energy. Question 4 says which features are possessed by all plant cells? Now this is a trick question because usually you would go for option A, which says that they have both cell walls and chloroplasts, but if you think about the root hair cell, they don't have chloroplasts, which eliminates options A and C. All plant cells do have cell walls, so the answer is B. The diagram shows a mitochondrion. The diagram is 70 millimeters long. What's the magnification of the diagram? So let's start by writing the formula. Magnification is equal to measured length over actual length. In this case, we're trying to find the magnification. The measured length is given to be 70 millimeter, but remember that you have to have the numbers in the same units. So 70 millimeter is 70,000 micrometer divided by 1 micrometer gives us 70,000. So the answer is D. The diagram shows a test tube containing clear jelly. A drop of blue ink is injected into the middle of the jelly. The blue color of the ink spreads throughout the jelly. By which process does the blue ink spread through the jelly? It's not active transport because it's moving from an area of higher concentration where the blue ink is injected, which is the middle, to an area of lower concentration where there's no blue ink. It's not catalysis because there's no enzyme or any catalyst to speed up the chemical reaction, and it's not even a chemical reaction. It is diffusion because it's moving from an area of high concentration to low concentration. It's not osmosis because it's not the water that's moving, and there's no partially permeable membrane. Question 7 says which role describes active transport? Active transport is not the movement of water, so this eliminates option A and B. The movement of water is in osmosis. Active transport does use energy from respiration. You have no choice because they're both yes anyway. Through a cell membrane, yes, active transport does happen through a cell membrane. It happens through a cell membrane because it needs a protein channel, so the answer is D. Question 8 says which reagent is used when testing a food for vitamin C? The answer for this is B. There's not much explaining to do. Question 9 says small molecules are used as the basic unit in the synthesis of large food molecules. Which statement is correct? Amino acids are the basic unit of carbohydrates. This is wrong because amino acids are the basic unit of protein. Fatty acids are the basic unit of glycogen. This is wrong because fatty acids and glycerol make up fats, and the basic unit of glycogen is glucose. Glycerol is the basic unit of oils. This is true because oils are basically fats, so yes, simple sugar is the basic unit of protein. This is wrong because it's the basic unit of carbohydrates, and the basic unit of protein is amino acids. Question 10 says the diagram shows a protease enzyme catalyzing the breaking of a part of a protein molecule into smaller pieces. Which diagram has 3 correct labels? This is the enzyme. Yes. This is the substrate, but that's not the product. This is the product. That's not the product, it's the substrate, so B is wrong. C is correct because all the three labels are correct, and D is wrong because that's not the substrate, it's the enzyme. Question number 11 says the diagram shows an experiment to investigate the balance between respiration and photosynthesis. In which tube are both photosynthesis and respiration taking place at the same time? So for this question, it's important to remember that while plants only photosynthesize when there's light available, they respire 24/7. So in both options A and B, there's a black polythene to keep the light out, so there's no photosynthesis happening. In option C, it's a plant where light is available, so it is photosynthesizing, and they're always respiring, so this is happening at the same time. In option D, it's an animal, so there's no photosynthesis happening. Question 12 says the diagram shows the structure of 4 different cells from a plant. Which cell is from the upper epidermis of a leaf? We already know that answer A and C are wrong because they have chloroplasts, and the cells from the upper epidermis of a leaf don't have chloroplasts. The answer is not B because that's the root hair cell. You can tell by this structure, so it's D. Question 13 says the diagram shows the human alimentary canal. Which pair of structure both produce digestive enzymes? Structure 1 is the salivary gland. It produces amylase. So that eliminates options C and D. So it's between 2 and 3. 2 is the liver. It produces bile, which is not an enzyme. So the answer is B. Question number 14 says the cholera bacterium produces toxins that cause chloride ions to be secreted into the small intestine. How does this affect the water potential of blood in the intestinal capillaries and the intestinal contents? So this is the small intestine. The question said it causes chloride ions to be secreted into the small intestine. So when the ion concentration increases, the water potential decreases, and so in the capillaries there will be high water potential. So blood in the capillaries is higher or raised and then lowered, so the answer is C. Question 15 says starch in food is digested in 2 stages. In which part of the alimentary canal do the 2 stages occur? So the first stage is in the mouth using amylase. Amylase is secreted from the salivary glands into the mouth. It converts starch to maltose. The second part is in the small intestine. Maltase is secreted and it converts maltose into glucose. Amylase is secreted from the salivary glands into the mouth and is also secreted from the pancreas into pancreatic juices, which then flows into the small intestine. So mouth and then small intestine. The answer is C. Question number 16 says a celery stalk was placed into a beaker of blue dye. When the dye reached the leaves, the stalk was taken out and a section was cut as shown in the diagram. Which diagram shows the appearance of the cut end of the stalk? So the xylem in the stalk is going to absorb the water, which includes the blue dye, so the xylem in the vascular bundle is going to stain. Therefore, it's not A because it will stain. It is B because the xylem is present in vascular bundles around the stalk. It's not C because it won't stain from being in the water, it will stain from it being absorbed through the xylem. And it's not D because that's not the right position of the xylem, not everything is going to stain. Question number 17 says the table shows the rate of water flow through a tree over a 12-hour period. What conclusion can be drawn from the table? Option A says between 7 and 17 hours the rate of flow continuously increases. This is wrong because between 15 and 17 it actually decreases. Option B says the greatest increase in water flow in a 2-hour period is between 11 and 13 hours. For this option, you need to find the difference between the times of the day. Between 15 to 19, it decreases, so you don't have to find that difference. But you can see that the biggest difference is 110, which is between 11 and 13, so option B is correct. Option C says water does not flow up through a tree at night. This is wrong because the rate of flow, as you can see, is never 0, even when it is at night. Option D says water flow is affected by humidity. Now this is why I highlighted from the table, because the table never talks about humidity, it only talks about the time of the day. So while this option is true in general, it's not from the table, so it's incorrect. Question 18 says, scientists investigate the movement of substances in a plant. They cut a ring of tissue from the stem. Removing the tissue removes some of the transport vessels found around the edge of the stem. A few days later, they notice swelling above the area where the tissue has been removed. What causes the swelling? So first, let's show the structure of the stem. So as we said before, the outside is always the phloem, protecting the queen inside, which is the xylem. Like I said in previous videos, xylem is always either on top or in the middle. Phloem is always either outside protecting it or under it holding it up, because xylem is our queen. So in the question you can see that the outside part is being removed, which means that the phloem is removed. So this cancels out options C and D. Let's read out the second part of the answer. Sucrose can't move to the sink, or sucrose can't move to the source. Sucrose always moves from the source to the sink. So it's produced up in the leaves, and then it has to move down to the roots, because leaves photosynthesize and they need to send the sucrose made to the roots. So the answer is A. Question 19 says, the diagram shows the cross sections through 3 types of blood vessel not drawn to the same scale. Which section is from a vein and which is from a capillary? You can tell this is a capillary because the vein and the artery always look similar when it comes to structure and shape. So these two are the arteries and capillaries, V and W. Now V is the vein because, as you can see, it has a large lumen and thinner walls, while the artery has thicker walls and smaller lumen. So this is the artery. The vein is W, the capillary is X, so the answer is C. Question 20 says, by which route would an HIV infection not be transmissible? HIV is transmitted usually through sexual behaviors and syringe or needle use. It's transmitted through specific body fluids such as blood, semen, pre-seminal fluid, rectal fluids, vaginal fluids, and breast milk. In some rare cases, it's also passed from a pregnant mother to the baby. So blood, yes. Sharing needles, yes. Semen, yes. But it's not transmitted through the saliva. The only time it's transmitted through the saliva is when both partners have bleeding gums, but it's not directly transmitted through saliva. It has to be blood. Question 21 says, the diagram illustrates changes in air pressure taking place inside the lungs during a complete cycle of breathing. Atmospheric pressure is 101 kilopascals, at which point on the diagram are the words beginning to be lowered. Beginning to be lowered means you are just breathing out, and when you breathe out, the air has to go from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. Now, as the question says, it's a cycle of breathing, so before you breathe out, you obviously have to breathe in, and to breathe in, it has to be from high outside to low inside your body. So if you read the y-axis here, it says pressure in the lungs. So you're not really worried about these two. You're just worried about inside. So as you can see, the pressure goes from low to high. So we need a graph, a part of the graph that goes up. So it's not B or C because in both they're going down. And if you look at this part of the diagram I drew, you can see that we end up being higher than the atmosphere. So it can't be D because D comes up to the atmospheric level, which is 101 kilopascals, but in A actually goes above. So that's why the answer is A. Question 22 says, which process uses energy released by respiration? Diffusion does not use energy, it's a passive process. Evaporation doesn't use energy. Growth does use energy. Osmosis is also a passive process, it does not use energy. So the answer is C. Question 23 says the volume of oxygen taken up by germinating seeds was measured. The graph shows the result. What's the rate of oxygen uptake? To measure the rate of oxygen uptake, you have to see how many centimeters is in 1 minute. So if you take any of these points, I'm going to take the first point, it's 0.4 in 5 minutes. So if 0.4 centimeter cube is taken up in 5 minutes, then how many is in 1 minute? To find that, you have to divide 0.4 by 5, which gives you 0.08. So the answer is A. Question 24 says the diagram shows the structure on each side of a synaptic cleft. Which diagram is correctly labeled? The answer is A. B is wrong because that's not the direction of the impulse. C is wrong because the neurotransmitter receptors won't be on the same sides that the neurotransmitter molecules are released in. And D is wrong because these are not the released transmitters. Question 25 says dialysis is a method of regulating the composition of blood when the kidneys are not working properly. Which substance is absent from fresh dialysis fluid? Bile is not present in fresh dialysis fluid. Question 26 says the diagram shows a vertical section through part of a human eye. The fly is coming nearer to the eye. The eye begins to focus the image of the fly on its retina. So when something gets closer to the eye, the ciliary muscle contracts so that the lens can be fatter and the light can be deflected more so that it focuses on the retina. So Q contracts, this eliminates options B and D, and the lens becomes fatter, so the answer is C. Question 27 says, where is glucagon secreted and what is its effect on blood glucose concentration? Glucagon increases blood glucose concentration. It's basically the opposite of insulin. While insulin decreases blood glucose concentration, glucagon increases it, and they're both released in the pancreas, so the answer is C. Question 28 says, which statement about antibiotics is correct? Antibiotics are effective against viral diseases. This is wrong because antibiotics are not effective against viruses, it's only bacteria. Antibiotics are produced by white blood cells. This is wrong. They're not produced in the body, you take them in. Usually you would confuse this with antibodies, which are made by the white blood cells, but antibiotics are not made in the white blood cells. Antibiotics can provide pain relief. This is wrong. They don't provide pain relief. Antibiotics can stop bacteria making new cell walls. This is true, which is actually the reason it only works with bacteria and not viruses. Viruses don't have cell walls, so antibiotics are not effective towards them. Question 29 says, where is progesterone produced? Progesterone is produced in the ovary, so A. Question number 30 says, which features allow the sperm cells to dissolve the jelly coating of the egg cell? The answer is A. Acrosome develops on the head of the sperm cells, and it releases enzymes that help dissolve the coat so that the nucleus of the sperm cell and the nucleus of the egg cell can fuse to form the embryo. Question 31 says, parents with alleles A, B, and OO can produce children with which blood groups? So first, let's draw the Punnett square. Groups that can form is A and B. So the answer is A. Question 32 says, the diagram shows the chromosomes in the nucleus of a cell that divides by mitosis. Which diagram shows the chromosomes in the nucleus of one of the daughter cells produced? It's important to remember that mitosis produces genetically identical daughter cells, so the chromosomes in the nucleus have to be identical to this one. So the answer is C. Question 33 says, during protein synthesis, what's the function of the ribosome? Answer A is correct because the ribosome does assemble amino acids in the chain. B is wrong because carrying a copy of a gene to the cytoplasm is the function of the mRNA. C is wrong because containing the code for the synthesis of the protein is in the nucleus. And determining the order of bases in the protein is based off the bases in DNA. Question 34 says, the table shows some inherited features. Which features show codominance? First, let me start off by explaining what codominance is. Sometimes two alleles may neither be dominant nor recessive. Instead, both of them have an effect on a heterozygous organism. So they're said to be codominant. For example, if we breed red and white flowers, both alleles are neither dominant nor recessive, so we end up having pink flowers. They both have an effect on the heterozygous organism. This can happen with blood groups because if we breed two organisms that have a blood group A, alleles AA and BB, will end up having offsprings with AB. Both the alleles have an effect on the organism, so options C and D are eliminated. Color blindness does not show codominance because let's say a female with normal vision and a male that's colorblind, you end up getting a heterozygous organism that is a carrier for the recessive gene. So for example, a female with the genotype is not colorblind, but she is a carrier for color blindness. They won't co-dominate and both have an effect. The organism will just be a carrier, and it's the same with sex. They can't co-dominate, so the answer is B. Question 35 says, these events may happen when an antibiotic is used to treat a bacterial infection. Which sequence may produce a strain of antibiotic-resistant bacteria? So first, let's read out the steps. The antibiotic kills most of the bacteria. The antibiotic-resistant bacteria reproduce. The antibiotic-resistant bacteria survive. Some bacteria mutate and are resistant to... Obviously, we know this one is first because first they have to mutate to develop those resistant genes. And then it will kill most of the other bacteria that are not resistant. And then the bacteria that is resistant will survive, and then they reproduce. So the order is 4, 1, 3, 2. Answer is D. Question 36 says, the diagram shows the energy within the producers in an ecosystem and how much is transferred to primary consumers and eventually lost to the environment. How much energy is transferred from primary consumers to secondary consumers? So in this question, there's two ways to do it. The first way is the 10% past 90 lost method, in which you look at how much it has, and you know that only 10% is passed from one trophic level to the next. So 10% of 5,000 gives you 500, so the answer is C. Next method, I actually prefer this one because it's based on the diagram, and when they give you a diagram, it's better that you use it. So in this method, primary consumers have 5,000 kilojoules, and from that, they lose 4,500 kilojoules to the surroundings. So to find out what's passed to secondary consumers, you have to subtract these. And this gives you the same answer, but I prefer you use the diagram if given. Question 37 says, which is the tertiary consumer in the food chain? So, common mistake is people will start counting from here, 1, 2, 3, and they would choose B. But plants are not a consumer, they're a producer, so they don't count. So you start counting from pond snails. 1, 2, 3, so the answer is C. Question 38 says, scientists in one country are using bacteria to break down crude oil in abandoned oil fields. This produces natural gas, which is used as a fuel. Why are bacteria useful in this example of biotechnology? Bacteria are useful in this case because they reproduce quickly, since you need a large number of bacteria to break down all the crude oil. Question 39 says, the diagram shows the stages in the production of human insulin. Which stage uses the enzyme DNA ligase? DNA ligase is an enzyme that joins the plasmids back together into complete circles. It basically sticks the gene with the plasmid together, so the answer is C. Question 40 says, what's an undesirable effect of deforestation? A is wrong because deforestation doesn't create habitat, it destroys them, because by destroying the trees, the animals that live there no longer have a habitat. Loss of soil is correct because when you remove the trees, the soils no longer have the roots to hold them together. More species is wrong because it results in loss of biodiversity in species since all of these animals die. And reduced carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is wrong because by cutting down the trees, less photosynthesis happens, and so there's increased carbon dioxide. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, it helps me a lot. Okay, see you in the next video.